Don't worry, Miss Lambert. Despite the title, this presentation isn't about forbidden love or erotic romance or sadism. Sorry, ladies. No. Today I'm talking about grayness in a different sense. The gray that keeps us glued to the edge of our seats, staring at the screen, or that makes us twitch with excitement, waiting to turn the page. I'm talking about gray characters. Now, gray characters exist all throughout the literary and cinematic world. Characters like Draco Malfoy in Harry Potter, who joins the Death Eaters but fails to kill Dumbledore when he's given the chance. Or Walter White in Breaking Bad, who, dying of cancer, lies, kills, and cooks meth to provide for his family. But these characters exist for more than just our entertainment. Often, their makers are trying to communicate something to their audience, something that makes us wonder fundamental truths of human nature, prompts discussions about various social issues, and forces us to look inwards and question ourselves. Look no further than to Shakespeare's play, The Merchant of Venice. As one of the first social activists of his time, Shakespeare cleverly weaves his social agenda into complex, multidimensional characters. The first of these is Shylock, the Jewish moneylender. When Antonio fails to pay his debt, Shylock ruthlessly attempts to enact his revenge by demanding a pound of Antonio's flesh, as written in the bond. The other characters treat him like an inhumane, soulless monster, and we are inclined to think the same, especially when Portia entreats him to show mercy several times. But we must also remember how Shylock himself was treated. He was rated about his moneys and usances, called misbeliever and cutthroat dog, and spat upon, and labeled as an enemy. His daughter stole his money and left him for a Christian husband. As we think of all the injustices committed against Shylock and picture him in the end stripped of his money, identity, and faith by the Christians, we can't help but feel pity for him and all the Jews that suffer the same. Now, when I think of Shylock, I can't help but think of the Game of Thrones character Tyrion Lannister, the dwarf, or half-man as his father calls him. He views the world with a cold, calloused skepticism, and has every reason to. What has the world ever done for him but to make him into a monster and cast him to the outskirts of society? Even when Tyrion and Shylock commit heinous acts, we cannot consider them fully black characters, and we have the slightest bit of sympathy for their behaviors. Okay, maybe I lied a bit. It wouldn't be a Shakespeare play without some forbidden love. But this love is different. This love is a man's attraction for another man. Antonio, the Merchant of Venice, proves to be a second very gray character. And I mean literally gray. He starts off the whole play by saying, "In sooth, I know not why I am so sad." He continues with these dark, depressing statements, such as, "Every man must play a part, and mine a sad one," and, "I am a tainted wether of the flock, meetest for death. The weakest kind of fruit drops earliest to the ground, and so let me." While the question of why Antonio is so sad is never explicitly addressed in the play, it can be inferred that it is because Antonio is homosexual. He makes overly kind statements like, "My purse, my person, my extremist means lie all unlocked to your occasion," to Bassanio, and he is even willing to go to jail for Bassanio's sake. During Shakespeare's time, it would have been socially unacceptable for Antonio to come out of the closet and openly express his feelings for Bassanio. This makes him sad and allude to himself as weak and not deserving of life. But Antonio also takes out his frustration on Shylock. Antonio's personal insecurities and inability to express his feelings lead him to mistreat Shylock and abuse him verbally and physically. So while we pity Antonio for his predicament, he is not completely infallible. Antonio's grayness is particularly interesting to explore, considering the theory that Shakespeare himself was homosexual. Many scholars of his works have hypothesized that Shakespeare's Sonnet 116 about his maiden's unique beauty was actually dedicated to a man. This would give Shakespeare further incentive to give voice to a group of people who were not able to speak openly for themselves. Now, my final example of gray is a bit different from the characters of Shylock and Antonio. This shade of gray is the gray man. The concept of the gray man is someone who seems to pass by and blend in with the backdrop. His actions are discreet and subtle, but he is actually quite important. Almost like a spy, he gets in, does his job, and gets out. Lancelot, aka the generic pirate in Pirates of the Caribbean, is the gray man in The Merchant of Venice. But what exactly does Lancelot do? He appears sporadically in a couple of scenes, says a few comedic lines, and then we don't hear from him again. For example, he claims that the Jew is the very devil incarnate, and that he is a Jew if he served the Jew any longer. While these statements can be viewed as merely comedic relief to lighten the mood, Shakespeare is too smart for that. He uses the gray man, Lancelot, to once again further his agenda. Shakespeare is saying that all the prejudices and stereotypes about Jews are so ridiculous that they are laughable and only come out of the mouths of clowns. When we were young, we were taught that everything falls into two categories: bad or good, right or wrong, black or white. But as we've grown older and interacted with the world, we've come to realize that life is not that simple. Most things in the world don't fall into the categorical imperatives of black or white, but lie somewhere in between as a unique shade of gray, and there is nothing wrong with that. Shakespeare was one of the first to realize this truth, that nothing is absolute, that differences are not something to be feared and criticized, but accepted, that intrigue lies in the gray.